Hi, everybody. My name is Bryce Rankins, and this is my co-host, Brian Romero.
Hello.
And we are here to present to you the Starlight Archive. Brian and I are lifelong fans of Star Wars. We have been since 4th and 5th grade.
4th and 5th grade, yeah.
That's lifelong, because what happened before 4th grade? I don't know.
I barely remember.
Fractions? Cursive?
I hope not.
Anyway, I think they did. I think both of those did. I
Use
don't.
cursive so much now.
I mean, at least the letters in my name. Anyway, so we're both lifelong fans of Star Wars. We were both fans of the expanded universe. And when Disney buyout happened, the expanded universe became Legends. Some people were very angry. Some people were fine.
Yeah.
We were
kind of in the middle ground.
Yeah.
I just love
Cautiously
Star Wars,
optimistic.
so I'm like, you know what? It sucks that they're not going to use a lot of these stories and characters, but you know what? I'm excited for what they can come up with now.
But as we've seen since then with Star Wars Rebels, the expansion of Clone Wars and the Siege of Mandalore, Mandalorian, we have seen that there is very much a love for the expanded universe in the creative teams of Star Wars. And we are here to talk to you about an era of Star Wars that is not the Old Republic and not during the Skywalker saga and kind of untouched territory in both Legends and canon.
Yeah.
In an era we lovingly refer to as the High Republic.
Yeah.
So, without further ado, this is the Starlight Archive. So, this is the Starlight Archive. This is our new podcast. We have another podcast called Sneaky Geek, but convincing you to read the High Republic was that episode's goal. This podcast is here to guide you through the High Republic, convince you even further to read literally everything they have put out, including the magazine stories.
Or if not, we'll tell you about it. But not everything. Depending on the episode. But most of them no. But you never know.
Yeah. And if you don't want to read everything, congratulations, we got you, because we love talking about it. And if you do want to read everything, congratulations, we love talking about it, so you get to hear us talk about it. So, let's get into it.
Yeah.
The High Republic. All right, we're going to do this whole new podcast, 30, 40-minute episodes.
Yeah, something that if you're out walking your dog, you might get through an episode if you want to take an extra long walk. Or, hey, if you're driving to work, get through half of it, get through all of it. Depending on your drive. Depending on your ride. Yeah. So quick, fun, easy breakdowns of what's going on, what's not going on. We won't get too much into super spoilery territory, so if you are trying to read it all the way through, we're going to get you through the basics. We will have some episodes that are straight up like big spoilers, like Wave 1 recaps.
But we will warn you about it.
We will absolutely warn you about it. So you will know. And if any kind of spoilers do end up coming up, mid-episodes of what we're going through, you'll still know about it, and you'll have plenty of time to skip forward or pause and come back to it once you're caught up, because this podcast is for everybody.
Yeah, just like Star Wars.
Yeah.
Star Wars is for everyone, including you and your dog. A happy dog is an exhausted dog. Walk him for 40 minutes. It'll be good for you, and it means you get to listen to the whole thing.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody wins.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Yeah. Oh, shoot. Get done with our podcast, still walk around, check out one of the audiobooks.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh.
They're so good.
We'll get into it. We're getting excited.
Getting way ahead of ourselves.
All right. So, let's talk about...
How did this get made?
Yeah,
Why
how
did
this
it
get made? Not to be confused with the episode of the podcast.
The podcast,
how did this get made? But how did this whole era come about?
Right.
We know this is an era, as we've said before. This is an era that does not exist necessarily within either Legends or existing canon, because when the buyout happened, the expansions that happened within the canon post Disney buyout were aftermath books.
Yeah.
Comics taking place between the prequels and A New Hope, or between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, and that was pretty much it. For the first couple of years, it was basically most of the books and comics that came out were just in between A New Hope and Empire.
Yeah.
They're slowly expanding out from the middle.
Yeah, from the Skywalker saga, we are slowly expanding in both directions,
Right.
but this direction is backwards.
Yes.
So we want to talk about this High Republic.
Right. So the High Republic takes place about 200 years before the Phantom Menace. So most of the Jedi we know and love aren't there, except for Yoda.
And Oberyn Sistis.
Oberyn Sistis.
Yaddle.
Yeah. Yariel Poof.
Yariel Poof.
Yes, still on the council, chilling. All long neck and all.
I demand term limits for the council members.
Yeah, it's basically, just a new era of storytelling, which is really cool.
And a new era of Jedi for us, too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and everybody's in a different mindset because at this time, they're calling it the High Republic, which means pretty much everybody's prospering. Everything is peachy keen, and there's not a whole lot of issues going on.
Allegedly.
So it's kind of fun to explore that mindset.
It's fun because for me, I appreciate that we're talking about the Jedi at their most unified and their strongest.
Yeah.
There are certain disagreements that happen, and there's certainly some fast and loose play with the exact creed of the Jedi that we'll get into later. Yeah. But I really like that we are going to obviously be presented with a conflict because
Star Wars
and good storytelling.
Oh, yeah.
But how does the council take care of this conflict and handle this conflict when they've allegedly being at peace for so long, but also allegedly at their best?
Yeah.
When we saw the Clone Wars, we saw a council that had become dogmatic, that had become split over how to handle certain things.
Yeah.
With the Phantom Menace, with the Clone Wars, all the way through into the Revenge of the Sith, there is not necessarily a lot of infighting within the council, but
there's not a lot of balance, though.
There's not a lot of balance, and there's not a lot of good communication.
Yeah,
and in this, I feel like while the council has its problems, and I will absolutely vent about that in another episode, the council and the Jedi Order are functioning.
Yeah.
And they're functioning well, and they know what's going on.
Yeah.
Which is not what was happening when you have people like Dooku subverting.
Yeah.
And when you have people like Sifo Dyas going crazy and then basically being hidden from the council because they don't like what he can do.
Yeah. Yeah. They didn't take they've established that, a lot of people who have the Force, they experience different strengths and weaknesses with the Force.
Yeah,
so
and we
got those
applaud and appreciate that within the Jedi Order as well. It's not just like there's one way.
Right.
know?
So you have people that are good with animals. Some people are good with telekinesis. Some people have visions. And at the time of the prequels, those who had visions were like, oh no, we don't want to talk to them. No, visions are bad. And it's kind of like, how do they get to this point? Why do they get to this point? And the High Republic era kind of gives us a nice little background on how the Jedi of the prequel era kind of came to be.
So who do we have to blame for this? who was the one who went, these are all those things you're all talking about, Brian and Bryce? We should write about those.
Yeah.
Who are these people?
Yeah. So first we have Michael Siglain. He's the creative director at Lucasfilm Publishing. He's been in and around all the panels and cons and stuff, and been a cool guy to follow on Twitter and just to see it even on the High Republic show on YouTube. We'll get into all the good stuff later. So around 2018, he had an idea. So he found a couple of good writers that he wanted to work with, and he talked to them individually. He didn't really say exactly what the project was. He gave him kind of the basics, but he didn't also say who else he was contacting. I'm sure things were still being worked out and stuff, but one of the first people he talked to was Cavan Scott. He's done a whole bunch of comic books. He's done some Doctor Who books. He's been around. So he's our people. He talked to him, and I guess later on he talked to Charles Soule. And then right on down the list, we got Claudia Gray, Justina Ireland, Daniel Jose Older, George Mann. And then later on for phase 2, they bring in some more writers, which is really nice. It kind of expands what's going on. And so, after a while, there's this whole team of writers that are coming together to create this huge project.
Yeah.
And so with the project, they eventually focus it down, and they figure out that they want to do 3 different phases. And within each phase, they have little waves of books and such that are coming out.
Yeah, how does this story break down? Because this story is kind of unique in that this is not just 7 books, right? 7 novels. Or
I mean, like the new Jedi Order, that was just books with 6 or 7 different writers coming together. This is even bigger. It's a multi-year project, which again, new Jedi Order and all that kind of stuff was too. But this has 3 different kinds of books. It's got your regular novel, it's got a young adult novel, and it has your young reader novel. So basically, the difference is the main characters are typically adult age, and then with the young adult novels, they are young adults. So they're
teenagers,
maybe early 20s, and then young readers, they're middle school, if not younger. So it's not necessarily that they're written for the specific group of people, but that's kind of who the main characters are. And depending on what's going on, there could be a little more fun and not as dark, but at the same time, like, some of those young reader books have some dark stuff going on.
Some of those young reader books have messed me up.
Yeah.
Or young adult novels have messed me up. The young reader book have definitely...
Oh, there's death and they have to deal with, and
they deal with mature
stuff,
problems, but they're dealing with them as immature adult or young adult, and honestly, like middle schoolers, middle grades. Those aspects of the story have really impressed me because I feel like there are a lot of people who struggle to write youth, like they just can't fathom it. It's that kind of Principal Trenchbull from Matilda, like, ugh, children, disgusting little things, I'm glad I never was one. It's this there's this disconnect that doesn't necessarily always work, and I really feel like this whole group has done a really good job capturing not only, you know, young adults and even younger adolescents, but captured them from a perspective that is very real, that they are part of a very mature organization. As somebody who was a Boy Scout, I have seen all manner of how that can vary. But within my troop, there was a certain expectancy of how we were supposed to act. And that meant we would step up to challenges in a very unique way. And those, I was very fortunate to have a very, very wonderful troop that was very welcoming and not dogmatic.
Definitely.
And it's interesting to see because at the end of the day, we were still kids. And so there were plenty of things that we would step up to the challenge of that most of our peers would not. And there are plenty of things that would absolutely break us because we did not have the, what's the word I'm looking for? Skill, wherewithal, awareness. We didn't have the experience yet to deal with those problems. And I feel like that particular section of these books is where these really shine. And I feel like sometimes people write them off because they're like, oh, it's a YA novel, or oh, it's a middle grade novel.
I got to pick this book up at the kids section at Barnes & Noble? No, thanks. No.
I mean, bro, you're watching Star Wars. You've already acknowledged that you're into the thing that your, you know, little brother's into.
Star Wars is campy.
It is. It's campy, and
if
it
it's
is
not campy,
for everyone.
Yep, and if it's not campy, it's not Star Wars.
So it's really nice to see that they kind of find that balance, and I think they're doing it really, really well. And I think people may not realize how much they're really missing by not getting into the YA section of Star Wars, which there's plenty of in this entire long form storytelling. So beyond books, what else we got?
So we got those 3 kinds of books, but then we also go into comic books. So we had a prose version of everything, but we have different storylines going throughout with visuals in comic books, which, you know us, we're all about.
Yeah, if you've listened to our other podcast, you're fully aware that we are very, very into comic books.
Yes. So
listen to our other podcast. It's called Sneaky Geek.
So we have comic books, but we have 2 different kinds of comic books. We have the main Marvel line, which Kevin Scott writes, and then we have the High Republic Adventures line, first through IDW, and then now through Dark Horse.
Which is a very exciting thing for a whole nother reason, which we can talk about in the other podcast.
And the Marvel main line, sort of similar breakdown with the books. These are more adult characters going through, it's Star Wars. They're going through some war-y kind of stuff that they have to deal with.
In stars?
I know. Crazy. So then High Republic Adventures, same kind of thing, but with Padawans and a couple of younglings, and kind of showing how their younger group of crew and friends deal with this huge war going on from their perspective. That's by Daniel Jose Older. Also good stuff. Yoda's in it a few times. He eventually goes off. We'll get into it later. And it really establishes what these younglings are going through, which is a really cool, different perspective.
Yeah. And it's not just a rehash of what happened in the Clone Wars either, where you have somebody like Ahsoka who becomes a general. These are not Padawans being tasked with an army.
No.
Because this isn't a war that they're going into. This is something else.
Yeah.
It's hard to describe, but I mean, effectively, we're dealing with terrorism.
A huge scale.
Insurgencies.
Yeah.
Pirates. And it's very different in that regard, which is interesting because it's a new way to explore how these kids are dealing with these conflicts, because there's still all sorts of, you know, tragedy and
general
death and etc. that are going to happen.
Yeah.
But it's nice it's just very refreshing.
Right, yeah. So we had comics, which also includes a few miniseries, which is nice. So as the High Republic was going on and storylines started really forming and kind of kicking into gear, we had a few extra little tiny 4 or 5 issue miniseries that kind of delve with a few different issues going on.
Right. Short arcs, though. Still within the comic realm.
Yeah.
And then there's manga.
Yeah.
Which there's not a ton of them, but that is effectively a slightly different media than just standard American comics.
Right.
And then there's, of course, short stories.
Short stories.
Within Star Wars Insider magazine. And I love them so much.
And I've read most of them. Because they're short stories, they're able to tell side character stories of people and even non-Jedi, non-really Republic figureheads and just everyday people and kind of how they're going through.
Almost like From a Certain Point of View, which is, for those of you who don't know, another Star Wars series of books. But in that it's also like directly connected and kind of finishes off stories that novels don't necessarily need to finish.
Yeah.
Which has been really nice. Mm-hmm. And then there's also a radio play.
An
audio drama.
Yeah. So these are full casted audio dramas, and there's typically been one per phase. The first two were great. So yeah, full audio dramas, and just like the audiobooks that accompany the regular books, it's full music, it's sound effects, so you get the full Star Wars experience.
Yeah. If I was to go into the High Republic, the question then is asked. Now, I say this as somebody who's actually read literally everything, but you've seen me read this after having already read it yourself.
Uh-huh.
You know, I came into the High Republic a little bit later. I did go to the panel at the end of phase 1 and got a lot of things spoiled for myself, but we both came to this with a completionist mindset. And I feel like I've even gone even more so because I also read, the Life Day story in the collection and the Starlight Stories collection as well. Mm-hmm. How much do you think we really need to get the whole story?
So that's the interesting part. The architects of this whole thing, they really set up to like, hey, if you just want to read the adult novels, you'll get a solid story out of that. If you just want to read the middle grade novels, you'll get a solid story out of that. If you just want to read the comics, you'll get a pretty solid story out of that. And for the most part, it kind of works, but what's really cool about all this is a lot of these characters will show up in other parts of this whole thing. So some of the characters that started off in the first novel end up in the comics for a little bit. Some of the characters that first showed up in the comics end up in some of the novels for a little bit. So it's really nice that the authors themselves kind of have this huge playground just to use everybody. And it really creates this huge immersive full story. So we're a little biased again, because we love Star Wars and we're just like, yeah, give us all the Star Wars. We're going to say read everything. But again, if you don't have the time, or if you can't find the comics, or if you can only find a certain amount of books, or if you just want to designate only a certain amount of time on certain stories, then hey, more power to you. Go for it.
Yeah. There's only one time that I found within the first phase where I felt like the young adult novel was absolutely paramount to fully understanding what happened in the adult novel.
Okay, yeah.
And that was during Wave 2.
Okay, yeah.
But every other time, I felt that they were concurrent, but not necessarily fully immersed in each other.
Yeah.
There's definitely a little bit of a divide, but some of them are so good that it's like, why would you skip that? And then some of them are really good, but you wouldn't necessarily even know about that story or need to know about that story if you hadn't gotten and read the young adult novel before.
Yeah.
So it can be a little bit much, I feel like, to take on.
Yeah.
But the good news is there is a podcast that actually will break down how these all work together.
Oh my God, is there?
Yeah.
It's us. We're doing it.
We're doing it.
Boom.
Yes.
We got you guys. Easy.
Yeah. I really do feel like with this podcast, we can help people basically do for them what you effectively did for me. By giving these big lists and going, okay, now you read this, now you read this, now you read this. And occasionally even checking in going, hey, it seems like these things are actually happening simultaneously. Yeah. Can I take a break mid-book and read these comics?
Yeah.
And you could go, not until this chapter,
Yeah,
and
which we totally did.
If you're literally like overwhelmed by the just sheer amount of media that you're supposed to consume in order to understand all of this, we got you. If you are overwhelmed to the point where you're like, I'm going to need to skip a couple of those, we also got you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not one to necessarily, I shy from spoilers as much as I possibly can.
Right, yeah.
But I know plenty of people who are like, just tell me so that I can go to the next thing.
Mm-hmm. Hey, we'll do that too.
And I'm here for that. I'm here for that, and I think we can accomplish that pretty well.
Oh yeah. So we kind of got into the basics of it. We talked about different books, and again, Bryce was just mentioning some things integrate really well, some things are kind of a little bit out of place, and for the most part, it's like 75% linear storytelling where you can kind of go from one thing to another, but there are some overlaps with some of the books. Some of the comics take place during the same time as one of the other books, but they're happening on separate planets doing two completely separate things, so it's okay. But again, it can't be a little overwhelming, but in a fun way.
Honestly, it's also really nice to go, I want more of this story, but I need a break from listening to the book or reading a physical book.
Yeah.
And going, I need a break from the story, but I don't want to stop consuming this story.
Yeah.
So I can read the comic tie-in.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And hopefully our versions of explaining what happened during this will provide at least enough information that if you aren't going to go seeking out trade paperbacks or single issues of this comic, or if you're not going to have the time to listen to the YA novel, we can cover that.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned it before. We've said it. We've said all these fancy words about phases and waves and all that. But let's break that down.
Yes.
Phases and waves.
Right. So we have...
This sounds like a physics class.
Yeah. So we have 3 phases that the architects kind of put together for the entirety of the High Republic. So we have phase 1, which is the Light of the Jedi. We got phase 2, which is Quest of the Jedi. And we have phase 3, which is Trials of the Jedi. The way they set the phases up is kind of like the movies and the trilogy. So phase 1, kind of think of your original trilogy.
The Ridge Tridge.
Phase 2 are the prequels. So this actually happens 150 years before phase 1.
Okay.
So this is 350 years now before Phantom Menace.
What's interesting about that too is like 20 something plus years before the Battle of Yavin in the Phantom Menace, we were tying in directly to a character.
Yeah.
And it would seem like jumping 150 years may not tie us in to characters in phase 1.
Oh, you would think that.
However, I mean, obviously with characters such as the Blade of Berdara and Opo-Ren-Sissus and Yoda and Yaddle, with characters like that, we're gonna see them in phase 2.
Yeah, yeah.
But there are new characters. I mean, I say the Blade of Berdara like anybody knows who that is if they've just started. But there are new characters that their whole family are like have a history that is worth knowing. Definitely. That starts in phase 2 during this 150 years before phase 1 even happens, which is, if you're doing the math for those of you following along at home, 350 years or so before the Phantom Menace.
Right. Yep.
Okay, so that's phase
2. And then once that finishes up, we go back up to kind of the present times to phase 3, which happens 1 year after phase 1.
Okay, so we just like the sequels that are happening after the original trilogy.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But instead of 20, 30 some odd years after, like the movies,
it's like the next.
It's just one. It's one. It's 1 year. We're cool.
Is it 1 year or 6 months?
1 year.
1 year. Okay. So we jump ahead 1 year and then we're back again.
But within each phase, we have waves. And it's kind of cool how they set it up is they have kind of the kickoff novel and then the 3 other books that go with it. So we have the middle grade and the young adult with each phase. And then obviously we have all the comics that are all up in there too.
Brian, we forgot one other element of this storytelling. The picture book.
The picture books. Oh, yeah.
Barry Yaga's picture books.
Yeah. So
traumatize your own youngling.
Yeah. So with phase 1, funny enough, that's the only time they did it. We have these picture books that took 2 or 3 chapters of the main novels and turned them into like little kid picture books.
Like practically little golden books.
Yeah. Complete with stickers.
Yeah.
Which are great. And they were really hard to find. And I went on a hunt. My mission was to find these books all around Orange County. Ended up finding them at Barnes & Noble in Fullerton and picked up a couple copies each. And then I think I was missing 1 book. So I had to go find that in Huntington Beach maybe. But yeah, so I got a couple copies of each.
The things we do for love.
Yeah. Yep.
Anyway, so within each of these waves, though, we have a regular Star Wars novel.
Regular novel, yeah.
A YA novel, and then a middle grade.
Yeah.
And the middle grade books are kind of those squarish ones.
Yes.
Right? Like Test of Courage and the like. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have those. And again, we have the comics that are all involved in there. And
kind of the through line is those comics. Because they're bringing in information that's happening from all of these other stories.
Mm-hmm. So everything's fairly interconnected, but you can still get a decent story if, again, you just want to read one type of book or just the comics. It's still a pretty solid read. So
I mean, at the beginning of each comic, there is a quick crawl that will explain to you what's been going on, especially if something has happened in a book.
Yeah.
And at the beginning of each book, they will tell you so and so is off fighting this group, and that was happening in the comics.
Yes.
So they let you know what's going on. They certainly don't leave you in the dark.
Right. And so phase 1 has 3 waves, and that whole phase took place over in universe. I believe it's like a year and a half or so.
Thereabouts.
Yeah. And as it was released in book form, comic book form, all that stuff, in real life, it took about a year to get everything out, which was kind of cool. You had pretty quick release on some stuff.
Yeah.
Phase 2 only has 2 waves.
Oh.
Yeah. And it all centers around the Battle of Jeddah, which we'll get into.
You will be very excited about all of the things with Jeddah.
Yeah.
And if you're not, that's okay. But
that was one of my favorite storylines from the whole shebang so far.
And now we're going into phase 3, which is happening as we record this. Phase 3 is not completed.
No. So actually there's a new young reader book out tomorrow.
At the time of recording
this. Also, happy Ahsoka Day, everybody.
Happy Ahsoka Tano Day, everybody.
Yeah. That is today, the 29th.
It is the official anniversary of the release of the Clone Wars movie.
Yeah.
And the
classic
creation of Ahsoka Tano.
And one of the other greatest creations ever, Stinky.
Happy Stinky Day, everybody.
Happy Stinky Day, everybody. And Ahsoka too, if you celebrate,
Yeah, I mean, yes.
Again, Star Wars for everybody.
Happy Ahsoka Day for all of those who celebrate.
Yeah. And then, again, back to phase 3, and that's currently going on right now. We had the Eye of Darkness was out back in November. We've had 3 or 4 of the mainline comic issues that have been out, and everything's just kind of continuing on from the craziness that happened at the end of phase 1. So it's been a crazy year, and if you've been following along with me, it's been a long year because we don't know what happened to half the characters at the end of phase 1.
Yeah.
Because we went right into phase 2.
Which, luckily for me, because I finished phase 1 very recently.
Yeah.
But for everybody who was following along, you guys basically had almost 2 full years before you got anything.
Any info. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, so the cons...
Those poor people.
Yeah, so I remember San Diego Comic-Con at that panel recently, they dropped some very heavy hints of certain characters, and it half broke the Star Wars internet. So it was good stuff. Relieving, and we'll talk more about that later. Yeah, so that kind of breaks down the general breakdown of the High Republic for there.
This whole High Republic, this whole idea, this whole timeline, these of the 3 phases that are happening now, mentions of these events have happened in the existing canon that does take place during the Skywalker saga.
Yeah, a little bit. They mentioned it too in some of the interviews that they've done, that this huge project, obviously takes years to plan and write and just really give it out to the world. And a lot of these storytellers are involved with other places in Lucasfilm, like Cavan Scott, who wrote the Dooku Jedi Lost audio drama. That's another full audio drama, which is really well done. It's basically based around Asajj Ventress finding out about Dooku during her time as a Sith apprentice, basically. And so they have the original voice actor of Asajj Ventress in there doing her role, which was great. And then we have a few other great voice actors doing everybody else. But because Cavan Scott was working on the High Republic and doing this novel, he sprinkled in the first mention of the High Republic, which was really cool. And at the time, I was like, what's the High Republic? Smash cut to now, and we're like, oh, that's what it is. And then we also have Charles Soule, who is currently writing the main Star Wars line, but before that, he did a few of the miniseries. So he did Anakin and Obi-Wan, which is great, kind of based around Anakin and Obi-Wan. That story happens in between episodes 1 and 2, and it focuses on Anakin kind of like questioning his role within the Jedi, and if he even wants to like continue on, which is an interesting aspect. But it also sprinkled in his little friendship with a little homie named Sheev. So we kind of see a nice little buildup of Anakin getting to trust Palpatine.
Yeah.
Enough gushing over that. He also did The Rise of Kylo Ren. And this book takes place about 5 or 6 years before the sequel trilogy, but it focuses on Ben Solo and his fall and him training with Luke. And early on, Luke, and Laura Santeca go to Elphrona to a Jedi temple, and they find Avar Kriss's holocron.
But who's Avar Kriss? We didn't even know at the time.
Yeah,
which
is
wild.
We're like, oh, this cool older Jedi Master from way before. And I think they mentioned High Republic in there too. And so they started sprinkling all these little things here and there just to kind of set the tone and kind of start piquing some interest. And that kind of helped lead into, Project Luminous, which is what this was called beforehand. Before it was officially announced as the High Republic in February of 2020.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, and because that's, around the time of the pandemic, turns out these books were supposed to start coming out a little bit earlier, but, things get pushed off, as they did. So I guess I can kind of take us into kind of a general overview story-wise. What are the Jedi dealing with? What is the Republic dealing with? Because at the time, like we said, the Jedi and the Republic is kind of at their height of themselves. So what does this whole story involve? We've mentioned the waves and the phases, and we've name dropped Avar Kriss and Yoda's around, but what's actually going on? Well, this is the height of the Republic. This is the height of the Jedi. There's technically peace everywhere. What happens when that just gets upended? So we have this huge thing that happens called the Great Disaster. Long story short,
something goes wrong in hyperspace.
Something goes wrong in hyperspace, and now there's random debris flying through hyperspace and crashing
out of hyperspace,
crashing into planets, crashing into ships, wreaking all sorts of havoc, and they don't know what happened. They don't know why it happened, but they now have to deal with this huge emergency. Emergency. Things emerged. Do you get it? Do you get it?
I do.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Whew. It's a close one.
I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Whoa. Yeah, so what are the Jedi doing? What are they not doing? What's the Republic doing? What are they not doing? Who are these new villains, the Nihil, that are showing up? Basically, they're pirates. They're rad. They're non-Force users. And we get to see that kind of villain really wreak havoc on the galaxy. And as Star Wars recently, most things are about people with the Force.
Yeah.
And this one is only about half the people with the Force. So we get to see that really cool aspect of stuff. And from there, shenanigans happen, and they release plant-like monsters that are really cool.
The Drengir.
So we get to see just all sorts of chaos going on. And that's where a lot of these different mediums come in. We got the comic books dealing with some stuff. We got the novels dealing with some stuff. We got the young readers dealing with some stuff. But again, the characters will bounce back and forth. Most of them are different storylines. Most of them reference the other storylines, so you're not super lost. But again, if you read everything, you get a huge completionist story going in. And if not, again, you get a nice story with comics. You get a nice story with the main books. And what's really cool with this, they announced that one of the characters introduced in these books is going to appear in the Acolyte TV show coming out.
Yes. Which I imagine might be the reason some of you guys have even come to listen to this podcast,
is
to get caught up with that. And
yeah,
we
got
will
there.
get...
Yeah. So, again, at the time of this recording, we don't know when the Acolyte is coming out. We do know it's sometime this year. We just don't know when. But now's a great time to read up on the character of Vern and where she comes in. She's a Mary Ellen, and they've established in the books and such that their lifespan is longer. So her character is going to show up in the Acolyte, which is going to be freaking awesome. And it's a really cool tie-in to just this whole era that Lucasfilm is taking it very seriously and is really invested. Obviously, they're invested with how much work they're putting into this, but also that they want to make sure that Star Wars is kind of all tied together, even though it's very separate eras. Again, we got Yoda that's 900 when he passes away, and he's been around for a while. And there's a lot of different aliens. Chewie's, 200 years old, some odd like that? So, he hasn't shown up. Spoilers. But different alien species live for different amounts of time, and that really comes into play with this whole era. And part of the galaxy, which is really nice. Kind of opens everything up, if you will. Back to the Acolyte, that happens 100 years before the Phantom Menace. So, it happens at the tail end of the High Republic. I guess you can call it kind of a High Republic show, but at the same time, we don't know anything yet. And
we know very little.
Yeah. I saw the trailer in London at Celebration because I was lucky enough to go, and it was amazing. And I am just as excited for Acolyte as I was for Ahsoka.
Wow.
Which is saying a lot because I was super excited for Ahsoka for many reasons. But yeah, so I'm excited to see where the show goes and how it overall ties into the High Republic. They did say that they used a lot of the designs and overall feel. And you guys can find it online. Lucasfilm really did a deep dive on the art and the character designs. And there's a great art of book that's out that covers everything. And we'll get into that too on a separate episode. But, that's something that you guys can take a look at. Pick it up at your local bookstore before you check online, because brick and mortar, you know how it goes. So there's so many other tie-ins that are going on currently. We still have comic tie-ins with the current original trilogy era books. Luke and them go to no space where the Nihil live or used to live. And again, Luke found a holocron of Avar Kriss'.
Did they go to the Amaxine station? No.
Snoke lived on the Amaxine station.
Snoke lived on the Amaxine station,
so,
which the Amaxine station that he lives on in the comics makes an appearance in the High Republic.
In fact, that's where it first showed up in the Rise of the Resistance comic book miniseries.
Okay.
Each issue had a different character focus.
They focused on, yeah.
Which was great. Written by Tom Taylor of super cool DC fame now. So it was cool that he signed one of my copies, and actually I got Charles Soule to sign one of my Darth Vader issues. This was before the High Republic, and he was writing the Darth Vader series, which was fantastic. If you haven't,
so good.
If you haven't read his run yet, they're all good. But yeah, so we have those comics, but also we have video games. So the sequel to Jedi Fallen Order, Jedi Survivor, half that storyline involves High Republic Jedi.
That's crazy. I still haven't gotten around to playing that one.
Yeah, so we won't get into too many spoilers just yet, but we definitely will. So we'll get there when we get there. And that was such a huge thing, and I'm excited for that Art of book that's coming out next month, because I'm sure it's going to feature a whole bunch of High Republic stuff. But then Disneyland released Stellan Gios's lightsaber.
Yeah, and they had that cool little mug.
Yeah. There's a nice little teacup mug thing that I got, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. This will be nice for my tea that I rarely drink anymore. But it's all High Republic themed and design, which is awesome. So they're really taking this very seriously, and they want everybody to get in on it, obviously. And heck, even there's a kids show now, Young Jedi Adventures. That's
the Young Jedi Adventures takes place during that.
And even Kevin Scott wrote an episode, and he brought a few of the Jedi on there.
Yeah.
Which was funny, because when they announced that show, they're like, why are they making a kids show about a bunch of Padawans that are going to get killed by Darth Vader? They're not. This is like 205 years before, give or take. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's not the Padawans from episode 3. Y'all can relax.
Yeah. There's people like getting angry on the internet. We are not those people.
What? No.
We are not those people.
Yeah. So that's kind of the basics of the High Republic. And as we're going on through this show, we want to, again, give a nice breakdown of the phases and the waves. We're going to talk about some of the video game tie-ins. We're going to talk about the Young Jedi Adventures stuff. Once the Acolyte information comes out, even when the show starts, we'll definitely be talking about it. What we want to do, again, we're going to keep with some minor spoilers here and there. You'll know about when we go into very major spoilers. We're going to break down our phases into the waves, and as we go into the next wave, we will do a very deep dive, very spoiler-heavy recap on the previous wave to get you ready. So if you want spoilers, that's your episode you want to listen to, but also listen to everything else because it'll give context to all that.
Yeah.
But also, if you don't want major spoilers, skip it, because we want this to be for everybody, and that's going to be a nice accessible part that you'll get back to it later once you do read through everything. Or hey, if you just want those spoilers, we got you.
Yeah. And that's I feel like that's one of the things that I really want to make sure sets us apart from, any other podcast that's just talking about this. Mm-hmm. There's definitely an approach to talking about things in a very casual setting where you're just kind of throwing out information. And if you wind up with some spoilers, you wind up with some spoilers. And if that's for you, then I got a great podcast for you. It's called Sneaky Geek. But this, we wanted to do a little bit more on the structured side. We wanted to kind of break these things down and really make sure that we're good at showing you when we are going to be spoiling something and when we're not. Mm-hmm. And this is not so much of a, hey, we may spoil something. Like, we will either intend to spoil something or we will avoid spoilers.
Yeah.
We will make sure we tag that in the show notes so that you can see what you're getting into, so that you don't accidentally, open it up and then suddenly you're like, who died?
Yeah.
So
we're not going to do that to you guys.
No, we won't do that to you. But going forward, we have a lot of content and a lot of episodes that we're really excited to be recording about. So we've got all of our phases that will be broken down into waves. We'll be talking about characters. We'll be talking about how those characters interact with each other, where you might remember them from. Because frankly, sometimes you start a book and you're like, I've read 4 different other storylines. Who was this person again? That's that so-and-so from that other book. They did this and this. He used to be so-and-so's Padawan. That kind of thing. We're here for you.
Yep.
So you can go into each new wave going, okay, I know what I need, who I need to be thinking about.
Yeah.
I know how they connect. And we'll hopefully do it a little bit better than a last time on, where why else are they showing you this scene from 4 seasons ago?
Right.
Of course this is going to come back today. I hate
last
that.
time on Dragon Ball Z.
It's become really common recently, not to go off on it or anything, but it's become really common lately where you see the last time on and they'll show you certain scenes that are important for context.
Yeah.
And you're like, so I guess that's going to be important this episode.
Yeah.
And it really spoils a lot. So I really want to try to avoid not just outright spoilers, but also
implied
spoilers and spoilers that you could put together if you just happen to have a brain that fires on 6 cylinders at a time, you know? So, I mean, probably
depending on your model.
I have a V8 brain. Maybe. I don't know. Anyway,
Depends.
Not important.
The ADHD, you'll join us.
But yeah, we've got each of the waves. We've got the characters. We'll have the spoilery versions. We'll have the not spoilery versions. And then we might have some fun in between episodes as well. And bring on some guests here and there. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty excited.
Yeah, no, this will be good. Real fun.
So here we are. The Starlight Archive is brought to you by Sneaky Geek Podcasts.
Yeah, that's also us.
Which is also us. We're really happy to bring this to you and really happy to be able to have this deep dive and provide information
in context
and tie it all together in a way that isn't necessarily just a Wikipedia hole.
Yeah.
Which, don't get me wrong, we all love a good Wikipedia hole.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you're going to go into a hole in a Wiki, that's the one to go. But this is family friendly. Damn it! We love a good Wikipedia hole. And, you know, that's fine. But, you know, sometimes the Wikipedia hole winds up taking you to like Sebulba's brother and not where you were intending to go. So we're going to try to keep it focused and keep it away from Sebulba's brother. Unless, of course, he shows up in phase 3. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I don't know.
Spoiler. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just making it up. I don't think Sebulba even has a brother.
He probably would have killed him.
Maybe.
In a race. It was his first foot race. He beat his brother. And he killed him? That's way dark. And against Sebulba, who knows? I don't know.
Sebulba doesn't even walk with his feet. He walks with his hands.
Anyways. So that's kind of stuff we may or may not get into, but mostly High Republic. So join us next time. We're going to talk about what's the general vibe of the galaxy, and then also the books that are involved in Wave 1.
So, yeah, tell us what you guys are excited for. If you have ideas for the podcast and things that you want us to talk about, we are always welcome for those. Yeah. You can find us on the socials. We're at Starlight Archive Podcast on Instagram. Find us there. Tell us what you think. Tell us what you want to hear from the podcast. You got other ideas. You have theories you want us talking about. Shoot us a message. Comment on our posts. We would love to start seeing a community build around this. And you can always find this podcast wherever podcasts are. Make sure you subscribe. And in the words of esteemed Chancellor Lena So, we are all the Republic. The Starlight Archive. Hosts Bryce Rankins and Brian Romero embark on a journey into the depths of Lucasfilm's multimedia storytelling initiative, the High Republic. Every week, they venture into uncharted territories of literature and comics, exploring the rich tapestry of this era with meticulous detail.